also hilarious. We had a lot of big sporting events happen in the past couple of weeks. On the 23rd, our cheer team did a great job at states. And then the following Monday, we had our girls' football game, and we got New Jersey, so everybody got to have one. Seniors won, obviously, but the juniors put up a good fight, so they're looking good for 2025. I also wanted to thank the teachers and everybody else that helped coach and put together this annual game, and because they put so much time into our classes, and we also did a great job fundraising by selling tickets, and we had a great turnout. The football and cheer team took the field for the last time this season during the Thanksgiving game, which was at home this year. And this is always a great game that alumni always come back for, and I think that's a really good testament to the culture that we have at HHS. Following this, we have the start of winter sports. Many teams just finished up their tryouts and are on to practices. I just came from my hockey practice. And then Flex Block on Tuesday, seniors had a mental health collaborative, which was a presentation about mental health essentials for beyond high school. We discussed signs versus symptoms in regards to mental health and a pyramid which showed us the levels of mental health states, and our presenters, Ms. Hanley and Ms. Prisco, did a really good job using visuals and personal anecdotes to discuss really hard topics and make the conversation about mental health easier and more accessible. To finish up, I wanted to give out some dates for upcoming events. On Monday the 9th, there's a winter band/jazz concert, and Tuesday the 10th, there is going to be a chorus and orchestra concert, and both are going to be at the high school. That's all I have.
That's great. Thank you. Anybody have any questions, comments for Savannah?
Did you end up going to that state conference?
I did not, no.
All right. Then if we want to move into the construction update.
Okay, thank you. So just going through the project dashboard. At this point, there's still been no safety concerns in the month of November. The schedule, the project is on schedule with the final completion slated for August of '26. In terms of the budget, we are 86% spent at this time. There have been no quality issues. FF&E, furniture, fixture, equipments, technology, and security. We are putting together the package to procure the IT equipment, and there have been no issues so far this month, or the month of November. Again, just an overview, looking at the construction site, just a review. The yellow is, again, the existing school in the play area. The gray is the driveway, the parking, and the loop road. The orange is the new building footprint, and the construction trailers are way over on the side in the dark green. So looking at some of the construction activities, the exterior wall was taken down in the pods that are between the classrooms on the far side. This is where the new addition will break through into the hallway. So you can see that initial demolition. They took down the exterior siding, put up another sheet of plywood on the inside, but basically getting prepped for that connection. This is a view of the geothermal, the supply and return lines that go from the field down to the vault. So you can see also the picture of the vault, and this is where everything gets connected from underground into the vault and then into the building. This first picture is a view of the CMU block that's installed at the foundation that outlines basically the future concrete slab-on-grade pour that will happen. And the next plumbing shows the underslab plumbing that was taking place before they can pour. And again, the underslab plumbing and the electrical conduits that are getting in place before they pour the slab. So looking at the progress this month, the geothermal circuit piping was tested, flushed, backfilled, and the geothermal vault has been set in place. Trenching for the geothermal supply and return lines from the vault to the addition is in progress. Underground plumbing and electrical install is in progress. Ledge hammering and removal is in progress as needed. Excavation for hydronic piping and remaining drainage structures is in progress. The base course of the CMU block at the foundation walls, prepping for that slab-on-grade pour. Damp proofing, rigid installation install, and backfilling has been completed at the foundation walls. Next month, look ahead, so the month of December. Obtaining the building permit, allowing the structural steel install, pouring that slab on grade at the new addition, begin the structural steel. That's when the building gets real, when you see the steel start popping up. Continue the site work, continue the submittal process, and continue the contractor MEP coordination. And there have been no change orders for this month. Looking at the budget update, the architect expenditures to date is 66%. Thought I had a loud enough voice, apologize. OPM expenditures to date is 26%, and the construction billings to date is 10%. Moving into Charleswood, not much has changed from the last update, but the one bullet point that is very important that did complete is the MEPA process. So getting the MEPA process completed allows us to get our project funding agreement from the MSBA, which will then begin to start the cash flow to the town. So that is an important milestone. The rest of the bullet points are the same as the last update. So again, looking at the next major milestones, these again have not changed, but the general contractor and subcontractor pre-call process will happen. Concom public hearing on the street improvements and potential select board approval. The final estimate of 90% CDs will happen in January of '25, with bidding documents in March or April of '25, and the construction contract award in May of '25. And just to continue to put this timeline in front of the community for both the Charleswood and Hopkins School in terms of completion, you can see that the building completion for Charleswood would be in the first quarter of '28, and the building completion for the Hopkins Lower Middle School will be in the fourth quarter of '26 to the second quarter of '27, with the modulars moving in the third quarter of '28. That's it. If there's any questions?
In the next month, look ahead, it says obtain building permit.
Yes, so there's certain things that they're allowed to do with temp building permits, if you will. So they've been able to work with the permit that they have, but the next step is getting that final permit.
Got it.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Okay. That then moves us into the superintendent's report. There it is. All right, we've also received some advice from the outside. If you're talking tonight into a microphone, you've got to be pretty close to it. They're advising us. So, just so you know, and for those of you who are coming up later. All right, so thank you. This is the superintendent's report for December. Oh, say the 4th, the 5th. I don't know what date it is. 5th, 2024. I don't know how I got to that right there. Anyway, so in this presentation tonight, I just want to share with you that we have a high school teacher who was one of the finalists of Teacher of the Year in Massachusetts. I want to talk a little bit about the middle school U.S. News and World Report ranking, and then I also want to spend some time clarifying some information around swatting and other kinds of hoax events. So here's Sam Breen. She's an English teacher at the high school. She, as you can see, Desi says, congratulations, your school has produced a semifinalist for the 2025 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. So we're very proud of Sam Breen. She does a great job, and she works in the English department, which is among our favorites. Okay, at the middle school, you probably saw that U.S. News and World Report ranked them 11th in Massachusetts, which was really nice. In terms of reading proficiency, we were at 16th in a tie, in math proficiency, 11th in a tie. What they do is they rank individual middle schools, so there are really over 400 different middle schools across Massachusetts. I think it's about 437, if I'm remembering the number correctly. So it's really quite an honor, I think, for us to be ranked that high. And as I always like to do, I like to show some of the per pupil expenditures for the people who are ranked above us. So I took them out in order: Brookline, Lexington, Belmont, and Needham. There were a couple other communities in there. For example, Weston's in there. We always talk about Weston because their per pupil is close to 30,000. But Brookline is at 25,800, Lexington 22,736, Belmont 18,294, Needham 22,808, and our per pupil expenditure in Hopkinton is at 16. So as I like to say, our kids are getting a very good education at a very nice price. So I want to talk about emergency procedures again, and you're probably thinking, didn't we just do this a couple of meetings ago? And the answer is yes, we did just do this a couple of meetings ago. But on Tuesday, December 3rd, which was just a couple of days ago, we met with the select board, the police officials, and fire officials. And we did that because we were invited to that select board meeting to really review the Hopkinton High School swatting event that took place on October 1st. And it felt like at that meeting there was some confusion in our community about why shelter in place was chosen. So I want to go back to the ALICE protocol because that's what we did not use on the day of the swatting incident. And you can see that I have put those circles all over that screen because I want to really emphasize that ALICE is not something that happens chronologically. While it will make an acronym with alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate, any of those things could happen in any order, and then they can even happen reiteratively. So we could alert and inform and then continue to inform. We could lock down. We could evacuate. We could counter. We could evacuate. All of those things continue to happen in an ALICE protocol. The ALICE protocol is really only designed so that we have a means of practicing something to ensure that a school or any really other institution uses this protocol as well, is prepared to respond proactively given the threat of a shooter or some kind of an intruder. So we did not use an ALICE protocol on that day. But instead, what we did was we went into a shelter in place. So when we determined, or I shouldn't say we determined, when the police determined on October 1st that the Hopkinton High School event that was taking place was a swatting event, meaning that it was a hoax, it was not real, that kind of eliminated the threat of an intruder or an active shooter. And when you eliminate that threat, that's when you decide to do the shelter in place. Now, can you ever fully eliminate that threat? Probably not, but the certainty is like greater than 99%, and I'll tell you how they get to that decision. Coincidentally, the administrators in the district were actually signed up for a webinar entitled Responding to and Investigating Bomb Threats and Swatting Hoaxes, and that was to take place on Wednesday, October 9th. So we were already registered to take that webinar when our swatting event took place on October 1st. And it's important, I think, for people to see who was presenting that webinar to us. So that was presented to us by the FBI Boston unit and also by the Massachusetts State Police. So we felt like they were foremost authorities on this, and when we attended, we learned a lot. So what did they promise before we signed up? They said that that 1-hour training would provide attendees an overview of the reality of bomb threats and swatting hoaxes, and include a detailed review of statistics and current trends as seen across the country. The training would also cover the characteristics of hoax calls, law enforcement best practices for assessment and response, and the decision-making process for evacuation or sheltering in place. Nowhere on that description does it say lockdown. It talks about evacuating or sheltering in place. And I think that that's important for the community to understand. So what criteria do we use to determine that it's a hoax? What you see on the screen inside that big box is actually a slide from their webinar. What they shared with us in the webinar is that since 1764, there have been over 500 acts of violence at schools, K-12 and college. And then they also informed us that no school shooter or active shooter had ever provided a direct warning via telephone, email, or social media. That is the first and #1 indicator that it's a hoax. So when someone called the police station on that day and said that there was an active shooter in the building and 2 people had already been shot, he was in a second-floor bathroom, there was a high likelihood at that point that it was a hoax, that it was a swatting event. So what other criteria can be used to determine that it's a hoax? If the receiver of the call, so someone in the police station, is able to keep the caller on the line and ask particular questions, for example, questions about geographic location or favorite teachers or courses or homerooms or names of hallways. So for example, we could say, oh, second floor, which wing? And that person may not be able to answer at all because they have never been anywhere near Hopkinton High School. The caller won't have answers. So that's another way to help us to decide that it is in fact a hoax. If the caller is using inflammatory language, and the presenter actually said sort of Call of Duty language, it's another very strong sign that it's a hoax. If the call is coming from a faraway place, and ours came from Missouri, we believe. If they mispronounce the name of the school or of the community. If the call comes from a virtual private network or a non-traceable number, it's very likely to be a hoax. And also if there's sort of an uptick in cases in a particular geographic area. So if what we start to see is in Massachusetts, starting on Monday, there are 5 different hoax calls, and then on Tuesday there are 7, and then on Wednesday there are 2, it's not unlikely that the ones that come in on Thursday and Friday are also going to be swatting calls. And then on October 1st, if someone really had been shot in the high school, we heard no gunshots. And the police only received 1 call. What we know is that when there's an actual intruder in a school building, what will happen is the local police station will be flooded with calls, literally thousands of calls, people calling and calling. There was only 1 call, and that was the call that came from the swatters. So once we determined that we were near to certain, and I like to say near to certain because we say we are certain at about 99.9999%, the police came in, and it was Officer Walker who said, you're going to do a shelter in place. And when we talk about sort of that command unit or who's kind of governing what's happening, for a while it was the Hopkinton High School administration, but when the police came in, they sort of take over in that position. So we were asked to shelter in place, and that's what Mr. Bishop did with his faculty and staff. So I want to talk a little bit, just to really clarify the differences between ALICE and shelter in place. ALICE is really used for times of intruder or active shooter threat. A shelter in place is used in times of a hoax, a medical emergency. So for example, if we have a student who needs to leave the building in an ambulance, we'll shelter in place just to give that student the privacy to get out into the ambulance. Or other low threat emergencies. So some of those kinds of things could be some kind of a chemical spill or something where you would want kids to be secure inside classrooms or other school spaces. With ALICE, the decision making will eventually fall, and that's according to the protocol, and it's based on best assessment to the adults in charge in the room. So all 5 of us sitting at this table could have classrooms, one next to the other in a hallway in a school. And as over the public address system, we are learning the movements of that intruder. We're all decision makers. I could decide to take my class and run to the exit. Mrs. Rothermick could decide to stay in a lockdown in her classroom with her students. So the decision-making really does become more distributed, I think, in Analysis, and in a shelter-in-place that's not necessarily true. Go ahead, Susan.
Do you work with the teachers on how to process and make that decision?
We do. The middle school, for example, has already done one of these drills, and then what happens afterward is if you go back to the scenario that we are all adjacent classrooms in one hallway, and I decide to take my kids and everybody else doesn't, we'll have conversations about, Carol Kavanaugh, why did you decide to evacuate your students when everybody else didn't? You know, because that is what really it all boils down to, is decision-making that you think is the best possible decision in the moment. And then in Alice, the ideal end result is obviously elimination of the threat, but also a safe evacuation. What police will tell us all the time is that we used to do lockdown, and that might have been about 15 years ago. And then they started to say lockdown is really not optimal, because if you have a group of kids sitting in a corner of a room, it's, you know, untimely death is all but certain if somebody is able to sort of penetrate that door or that wall or that room and get in there. So a safe evacuation is what we're always kind of looking at, and it's always harder to hit a moving target, whether you are a trained officer or whether you are someone who is using a gun for the first time.
So the difference between shelter in place and a lockdown is simply where your students are in the room, correct?
It kind of is that, yes. When we're locking down, we ask kids to kind of hover in a place where they can't be seen through the door, and you know, where they're nice and quiet so that someone wouldn't even believe someone was in that room. Shelter in place, our teachers kept teaching on that
Right.
day. And so during that shelter in place, people didn't really know what was happening. And we had people, you know, I create a scenario and say some people were doing acids and bases, some people were teaching the unit circle, some were reading novels, and that's what kept happening in that shelter in place. The ideal end result during the shelter in place is that student and staff remain in place until the emergency, whether it's real or perceived, is eliminated. Now, even though we are 99.9999% sure that what this is a hoax because all of the signs are there, the police still come in and check all of those bathrooms to ensure, and then they clear the building. And so that's what we mean when we say that a threat that is either real or perceived is eliminated, the shelter in place is lifted, and then, you know, or if the shelter in place could not be lifted, some other course of action could be pursued. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood why we chose shelter in place on that day, because it seemed like there was some misinformation around that. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the committee? Or Savannah? I know you lived through the swatting incident. Okay, and seeing none, I will move into the school committee chair report. Payroll warrants, I'm just going to move this so it goes into HCAM. Payroll warrants S25010 and S2511A have been approved and included in your folder. I did receive, we all received an email today from somebody with regards to the budget. Also have received some interest from community members about serving on the screening committee that we discussed at the last meeting. So we'll discuss that later in the meeting tonight, but just wanted to pass that along. Are there any liaison reports that people have tonight? Okay.
The LPAC met on 11/25/24. That's the English Learner Parent Advisory Council. There were 2 board members present, Xiaoshen Lin and Marcela Rodriguez. We met with Jen Suker. They were discussing future event ideas to be inclusive of the family members' kids and for parents only. They're really focusing on developing community among families from multiple angles, which was great. And they discussed the benefits of a virtual workshop to improve access for families with an interactive Q&A at the end.
Thank you. All right, if there are no others for now, we'll move into the new business, which is the first thing on our new business is the budget presentations. We have all of our principals here as well as the athletic director. I have in the agenda, starting with marathon, unless there's something that you guys would prefer to move around. So, and then I'm going to invite, I know Jean Birchman is here from the Appropriations Committee. Jean, if you want to come up and sit on stage so you're ready right by the microphone to, you can sit on either side, you can pick.
This is the longest walk. The loudest chair.
It's kind of like a beauty pageant.
Yeah, I know. I'm not used to that.
Welcome.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for obviously having me to share what our budgetary needs are for next year. So I'm sure you took a look at the Marathon proposed budget, and you saw there's not any asks in here, quite honestly. But overall, the FY26 Marathon budget, it to me sounds like a large number because that's not certainly my budget that I'm used to dealing with in my personal life. It is $4,805,959.56. The cents always comes in an odd way when you're doing different salary or budget items. It's an increase of 3.3%. But when you look at the budget and not requesting staff at this time or anything, those are really contractual obligations that make up that increase. There's an increase for the personnel summary, which is the daily substitute budget. Over the last few years, we have been short in that line item. We aim to cover our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our staff when they are out to best continue and carry on our learning. That is essential. So recognizing that was regularly short over the last few years, a decision, and an ask is to increase that account. You'll see that our supply item is larger than it's been in the past. This year, the proposed budget is $77,530. And what makes that seem larger, but it's really not, is that Marathon now has the budget for everybody in the building, which seems to make sense. In the past, special education budget supplies came out of special education. Preschool supplies had come out of preschool. ESOL teachers needed things, they came out of the ESOL. And it was a lot of different accounts for people that were all in Marathon. So now, in terms of streamlining the process, ideally, eventually, it's efficient because we're ordering and it's coming to one central location, buying perhaps items in greater bulk, but when you increase that volume, it does increase the total. When you look at what Marathon spends a lot of money on, it is consumables. Being an early childhood school, we are going to use construction paper. We are going to use a variety of paper, chart paper, lined paper, plain paper, paper of different sizes. And that's essential to our learning. That's never going to be replaced with a stagnant, whiteboards are great, but whiteboards are not everything. We need, to be able to cut and glue and shape and do all sorts of things with that. But something that I did not yet go over, and I'll go over that now, I apologize for skipping that, is our enrollment. When you look at where we are projected to be, that is why we do not need to ask for additional classroom teachers, additional staffing at this point. We've been fortunate in past years that when we've had a request to add a kindergarten class, increase those related arts, or adjustment counselor, we've been able to receive those requests and help us do the best job that we can do. Next year, we are projected to have 437 students at Marathon in kindergarten and first grade. So with kindergarten, that would be 258 students, averaging 18.4. I always love how you get the points when you're talking about children in class size, 18.4 in a class. And first grade, the projection is 279 students with 19.9 students in a class. For an early childhood building philosophy approach, those are fantastic numbers for us. So we are really looking forward to that coming true. As we know, that's often very difficult. I remember years ago, one of the projections, they said kindergarten and ninth grade are the hardest grades to predict enrollment because families often change. And I do see that. This year, one little side story, we had information about our open houses in our newsletters shared out with details. But on the online calendar, it just said open house. We had families drive from hours away asking where to go. And I said, well, you go see your teacher. They weren't there yet. They were checking out our school. So next year, I will make sure that I put a description on the online public calendar that you go here, and then you come to the open house. Yes. Let me see here. Any special education requests are in Abby Hanscom's budget. She presented that your last meeting, so there might be special education requests that would support Marathon, but that would be part of that budget. Preschool teaching staff would be part of that budget. It's the preschool supplies for general education that are part of the Marathon budget. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of where those things lie with that. Do you have any questions?
That's great. Any questions from the committee?
You may not have this answer, maybe Dr. Kavanaugh would. How accurate are the Dr. Wagman projections? Because the email we got today, plus I've seen other stories in the last year, that there seems to be some numbers or projections that contradict Dr. Wagman. Is that a real person, or is that the name of a
Yeah, no, it's a real person.
So Mrs. Rothmick actually has the enrollment numbers open right now on her laptop, so she can tell you how far we are from where we need to be in, or we're predicted to be in June of 2026.
Right, so when you look at where Dr. Wagman had us projected for the 23-24 school year, we went over that projection by 133 students. For this year, where the projection is, which is where we should be at the end of June, we're only 49 students away now from where we could be at the end of June. So last year, we went way over what the projection was, and at this point in time, students enroll all year long, so we're only 49 students away from hitting where we should be in June. So they're very true, and again, last year, we went way over the projection.
Historically, do we, I mean, that's
We're going over the projection every year.
every year.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah, I can't say we're ever like significantly below what the projection is. You know, if we get that target, that's great.
Yeah, we have not been below his target.
So, as you set up the budget, you're basing it on his target,
Yes.
right? Which we always go over. So, does that present a problem?
It did one year, and then the next year we added a kindergarten class because that year we had 24 children in a kindergarten class, and that was not ideal. It was very challenging. So we played catch up, if you will. In the moment, we couldn't address it because we didn't have the space. So that if we had had the space, maybe we could have addressed that earlier than the next year. That was a factor with that.
So can you remind me now, what is the status of the art room at Marathon?
It is back to an art room.
Okay, thank
So
you.
with the addition that was completed approximately a year ago at this time, everybody was moved in at this time into their new home, October, November. We moved into that addition. The art room returned to an art room. The music room returned to a music room. The library returned to only being the library. The health room is still a preschool room. It will always be a preschool room. These numbers for next year, something that they allow us to do, and I just want to knock on wood that we've never done, is hit the target that the building was built for with class size. So part of the educational plan, you worked on that a lot with Charles Wood. You know, what is your philosophy? What's your design? How are you going to instruct your students? The numbers predicted for next year align with that. We've never met them because of the enrollment that will increase, but we very well might next year, and that would be super.
Jean, do you have any questions for appropriations?
Just one, what's the enrollment this year?
I knew you were going to ask that, so I've got that. So kindergarten and first grade this year, we are 552. When you add in preschool, we're 647.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I had, thanks.
And I know Shai-Dul from the Select Board often watches from home. I don't know if there's somebody else from the Select Board here that wants to, do you have any questions, Amy? Okay. Do you want to come up in case you do for the next one? You're welcome to come up and,
Crouch.
do you want to come up so if you have questions for the next presenters?
Who's
We,
Jared?
we could move that
We got a
chair.
spot right over here. Up to you, though.
Is it a problem that the health room is not a health room?
It was lovely to have when we had it. Our teacher's fantastic. She teaches from a cart. She does amazing things. Is it terrible that we don't have it? No. Would it be nice to have the health room back? Yes.
Okay,
So-
so when you're talking health room, it's not like the nurse's room.
No, no, no. It's an instructional course. So our wellness teachers teach physical education.
Okay.
And our wellness teachers also teach health class. Like right now, great, incredible lessons. It's on personal safety and personal, safety with children. Like these are important lessons. They're teaching about how to take care of their teeth, their body, their health, eating habits, but also helping keep children safe in terms of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. So she travels. We have our health teachers travel to classes to
Okay.
teach that now.
Thank you.
Unless there are any other questions, we can move.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
it may not be just for Mr. DeVoe, it might be more for, kind of more globally. If Dr., what is his name?
Wagman.
And he is real. He did come. I remember when we were in the middle school for
In
school committee, I
2019,
think.
before the
Okay.
pandemic, he came and
It's a real
presented here.
person.
All
Yeah.
right, so we rely on him for projections across the district. And we base the budgets on his projections. And we always go over. So he's wrong every time.
Well, to be fair, we used to use a company called NASDAQ, and, and we would go way over. So
Okay.
he tracks a little more closely, to be fair.
Okay, I get it's not an exact
Yeah.
science, but
Yeah.
you'd think sometimes he'd get it right. Okay, so, but I assume that presents a challenge to all the principals and the district and the budget. So how do we then just start robbing Peter to pay Paul? And how do we fix that if we base the budget on projections that we always exceed?
So it's interesting because if you have 14 classrooms at a grade level and 14 kids come into that grade level, you can absorb them pretty readily because 21 kids go to 22, and then if another 14 come in, 22 go to 23. It's at that point where you'd have to have a lot of kids come into a
Okay.
grade level for it to be really
So there's a margin
problematic.
of error,
There is.
essentially. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
But I will say, in the one place where things are dynamic and you don't really know what's going to happen, is sometimes our special education numbers fluctuate. So we may have to take a BCBA out of one school, or a moderate or an intensive special educator, an OT or PT, and just move them around to kind of follow caseloads. That's not ideal, but it's one of the things that we do. Yes, that's right.
And so,
Yeah.
so missing the projections from a budget standpoint is not, the projections aren't so poorly projected that classrooms, schools, principals can't absorb those additional students.
Typically, we can do that,
Okay.
yes.
All right, got it, thank
A
you.
worst-case scenario sometimes is, and Mr. Bishop can speak to this, but sometimes you plan to have 50 kids sign up for a French class and 75 kids do, and now you're short a teacher during one period, right? So those things happen.
Okay, all right, got it, thanks.
Are we thinking at some point we ought to have another set of projections done, like a deep dive? Not obviously this year, but is that something that would be recommended now, since it's been since 2019, to recalibrate?
Yeah, and just to keep in mind, we did a projection pre-COVID, and then we did do a projection post-COVID. So there already was
Okay.
an adjustment. But yes,
Sorry, these projections aren't done every year?
not every year.
That's budgetary?
And so because you're doing a 10-year projection, a lot of the assumptions are kind of going to be the same, so the information isn't going to drastically change. But a couple years later, and you start to see more actual, then things could change a little bit more. So annually, you probably wouldn't see a big shift. But after a couple years and you look at your trends, you could see a better shift.
Got it.
What's the cost to have one of these done?
About 7,000? Less than 10.
Okay. Anybody else? Great, thank you. for all of that information. I'm going to invite Mr. Broninger to come up to present on Elmwood. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Wait, can you wait for the? Yes. We're short microphones here because we're not at HCAM.
Yeah, the enrollment numbers, I think you presented to us early in the budget season, but where would one find that on the website? In the packet from that meeting date?
We present them periodically, so they would be in superintendent's reports. But I would hate to have you look through that, like looking through it, for a needle in a haystack. So I can send them to you.
Yeah, well, it's not for
Unfortunately,
me,
you're
morely for the public. Like if it was on, if it's on the budget page, or just the budget presentation would be on the budget page, probably, right?
That would be helpful, yes.
Yeah.
We can do that, sure.
Okay.
Great. Welcome.
Hi. Nice to see everybody.
Nice to see you.
All right, so thank you for the opportunity to. Does that work? Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight to present the Elmwood FY26 budget request. So at Elmwood currently we have 645 students that make up our student population, and looking ahead to the projections that we just spent a minute or two talking about, Dr. Wagman has us projected for 674 students in second and third grade at Elmwood for next school year. So in looking at calculating our costs, we did round up to consider 680 students when considering our costs, thinking about our budget requests. So overall, the Elmwood school budget increase for to FY26. We're looking to request a 3% increase, and that includes our new personnel. Specifically, we are asking for a personnel increase of $130,550.71 and a non-payroll expense account increase of $7,690. Excuse me, one moment. Excuse me. Our most significant request is for an additional 1.0 assistant principal position. Currently, we have one assistant principal that supports our 645 student population. Mrs. Tynan, she does an outstanding job, and I'm sure folks can appreciate and understand it is really a demanding job. The assistant principal supports all of our students and families, supervises and evaluates our staff, leads and co-leads educational initiatives and professional learning opportunities, and also supports positive behavior work within our school building and also on the school buses. Adding a second assistant principal beginning in FY26 would allow for each position to provide a more individualized attention and support for our students, families, and staff, and also making it a far more manageable caseload of roughly 340 students rather than the 680 student number if one assistant principal were serving in that position. Our other personnel increase, and Principal DeBow spoke to this as well, we are looking to increase our Elmwood substitute account, and we're looking to increase that to a total of $80,000. That is a fairly significant increase. That's a 76.4% increase from our current FY25 line item there. And as Principal DeBow alluded to, that's being requested due to just what we've seen in an increased average staff absences over the last several years, and that will really help us to provide our highest level of support and continuation of learning for students when staff is absent. Finally, we're requesting a $3,829 increase. That's about 6.2% to our Elmwood expense accounts, with only really our general office supply account showing an increase greater than $1,000. For that, it's important to note too, we are not looking to increase the amount that we're spending per student, but we are considering 680 students as our number rather than sort of our 640, which we used as our projection last year. We did decide, based off of review of existing materials and estimated needs, not to increase 3 line items, and those are specifically our guidance supplies, March Madness texts, and our PBIS expense accounts. So that is a quick sort of overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have them.
Is there an ideal kind of ratio, assistant principal to students?
So that's a great question. I don't know if that number exists in my head. I can tell you, just seeing the day-to-day work that an assistant principal does, it's it's vast. You know, it's many directions, and I do think 640 students, which is about what we're projected for last year, 645 students right now. The time that goes into working with each individual student and family, as things arise, things that are planned and unplanned. You know, like I said, Mrs. Tynan is awesome. She does a great job. I think we're functioning really well right now. And I think that the need is such that as we continue to grow in both number and also just diversity and student, you know, coming with students coming with various needs and you know, looking to support every student, I do think that 680 students for one assistant principal is a number that does really feel too high.
I agree with, oh, I'm sorry.
Just to say, we do currently have 2 assistant principals at Hopkins, correct?
Correct.
I just wonder what research said. I think even at 300 and some, especially at that age level, that's still a lot of kids and parents.
For sure. Yeah, there's never a shortage of work, absolutely. So I don't know if that number exists for anybody else, but you know, like I said, I think that number has reached a point for us where it's really important that we start to look to add that additional staff. And also, I think part of the consideration for asking for this position now is thinking ahead, you know, a couple years down the road as well, when the Charleswood building opens and the staffing needs that are going to be required at that time. So I think by us starting to think about it now, it allows us to set ourselves up a little bit for the future as well.
What's the, and this may be a question for Dr. Kavanaugh, what's the principal-assistant principal ratio amongst the other schools in the district? So there, it's principal and assistant principal, right?
Yes.
So 2 people for 600?
Yes. In Mrs. DeBoe's building, she is working with just 1 assistant principal. However, if we think about the integrated preschool, she has an administrator who runs the integrated pre-K. So the students who are in there, like the 100 students there, you could take them out because they kind of have their own administrator. So it's probably more like
550 or so, something like that?
550-ish, yes, to the assistant principal in that building. Last year, the reason we added 1 at Hopkins is that they got up to about 687 students last year with 1 assistant principal. And typically, elementary schools will have much better ratios of, you know, principal to students and assistant principal to students. Ours are just getting very high. I think one of the slides I have shown at town meeting is when I started here, there were about 480 students at Hopkins, and today there are like 680 students at Hopkins. So 200 more students, and we just recently added 1 assistant principal.
And do we have testing or some type of metric that shows how are the students doing at Elmwood? They doing good?
The students are, our students always do well, I think, academically. However, and maybe, David, you could speak to this far better than I can, but, you know, our kids, when they're 7 and 8, they don't always do very well in unstructured places, for example, the school bus. So Mrs. Tynan ends up with a stack of bus slips and has to call down a number of kids and talk about behavior on the bus. And then there are things that happen in the classroom, so Mrs. Tynan will call down kids and try to figure out what is happening, whether it's as, you know, big an investigation as bullying, or if it's something like 2 kids just aren't getting along at recess. So that happens all day. She's dealing with kids and conflict, but also, as Mr. Broniger said, evaluating teachers, making sure that the schedule goes off for the day, making sure that substitutes are in the appropriate classrooms, like all of that work happens behind the scenes as well. It's a lot of work. She'll tell you that she, when we have absenteeism letters, for example, every time a student gets to their 7th absence, we have to send a letter home. And she probably sends literally hundreds of letters to families. And that's a lot of work, putting them together every time, you know, we get to another 7 benchmark. Thank you. And we really, I'll say that we would not be asking for a position that I didn't feel like we needed. You know, I say to our directors and our building principals all the time, you know, we are living in a time of need to have, not nice to have.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, and just want to go, Jean, did you have anything for appropriations?
All my questions got answered, thank you.
Amy, do you have any questions?
Putting the letters, so, yeah. So I don't think I have any questions, though.
And then I'm just going to ask a quick question. Susan, do you still have the projections pulled up, the enrollment projections? What were the enrollment projections for Elmwood for this fiscal year?
Oh, I have the actual.
Oh, you have the actual,
enrollment.
okay. So I'm just wondering how far over we were to get to the 645. Maybe you know that.
So don't quote me 100%, but I think we estimated 640 last year with the projections sitting somewhere around 631 or 2, and we're
Okay.
currently 645.
So a little over projection, and the projection for next year, the reason why I'm focusing on projections right now is just we did receive an email to the school committee on this specific to Elmwood, and I just want to make sure that it's flushed out a little bit for folks at home. And so the 674 is what we have as projected that the budget is based on. And that's tracking, looking at the grade behind, the first graders coming in.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sorry, so in trying to find any research to support the number of administrators to staff, the only thing that popped up relatively quickly is from 2019, which has a formula of 0.08 times the number of staff. What's the number of staff that we have at Elmwood? Sorry.
Nope, that's okay. Yeah, it's not an exact. It's just over 100 if you include all staff members.
100. Yeah. So according to this, 2 is less than the result.
All right, so if there are no other questions, we'll move on to Hopkins. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll invite Mr. Cotter up. So before we get started, Savannah, I know that you had stuff you had to take care of at home, so feel free when you've hit your time limit to step out. I don't want you to.
Last time I was on the stage, I believe I performed Ken at the 5th grade talent show, if anyone remembers that. It was an all-timer. I can only do it once, though. I left it all out there on the stage. So. Thank you for having me, and thank you for considering the budget request that we've put in here for Hopkins School. Currently, projecting that grade 4 next year would be around 336 students, grade 5 being around 347. Currently, right now, we have 15 sections in 4th grade and 15 sections in 5th grade to balance out those classes. So they would be around 22, 23 kids per class. At this point, it doesn't really matter how many more kids come. We're sort of running out of space to put those extra kids, hence the building project that we're going through. But I think that our class sizes will probably be around the same as what we have now. Overall, we're asking for an increase of $105,466, or 2.1% to the FY26 budget. I think the most important position that we're asking for is a 1.0 FTE for a second reading tutor at Hopkins School, which that comes at the cost of $40,475. And just to kind of go into a little bit of the reasoning for that, right now we have students that access our Tier 2 reading supports. There's around 50 to 60 students during the year that access that. However, we do have about 100 to 120 kids that will fall into that sort of partially meeting range on some of our assessments. So it doesn't mean that every kid needs Tier 2. Most of the kids that need it are getting it. But with the addition of this position, it would allow us to provide those Tier 2 services in the classroom. Part of the MTSS model that we're implementing really stresses kids being in the classroom when they can be. Right now, for us to get all of our kids to access that Tier 2 support, we sort of have to pull groups of kids from different classrooms to then go with the reading tutor or the reading specialist. So having this person who specializes in reading, they sort of have that expertise above the gen ed para who's already supporting classrooms would be really valuable for our kids that are in the yellow range that we're looking to sort of bump up in reading. So that's where that ask comes from. Like the other elementary schools, we are requesting to increase our sub-account to $70,000, which is a 62% increase. And that does reflect a 3-year average that shows an increase in staff absences. We do use subs to cover teachers and paraprofessionals so that we can make sure that kids are getting the support they need every day. We've also included an increase to our Hopkins general supply. We did not last year, and this is just as a result of certain items that we buy going up in cost. The reader's notebooks that we've purchased for each kid has gone up in cost. Our PBIS initiatives have gone up in cost. So that $3,700 is a reflection in the increased cost of getting all of those general supply items for our kids. And then lastly, a request for $750 to increase the assistant principal's professional development account. And that is something that is contractually obligated with the addition of the assistant principal at the school. We do have funds for professional development for each of those staff members, and so this would add that into the budget. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there questions, comments from the committee?
The 62% bump in the sub-account, I mean, that's obviously substantial. Is that just based on kind of poor projections in prior years based on, I assume it's just teachers missing school and being sick or maternity or sick days, all that kind of stuff?
It could be all of those,
Yeah.
all of those things.
I just want to say thank you for asking for the extra reading support. Being able to provide that support in the classroom, we know is so incredibly valuable.
Thank you.
Jean, do you have anything?
Great. I appreciate it.
Amy, did you have anything?
750,000? Oh, no.
Yes, so we were hoping to save a few minutes for that.
I can't promise anything for this year, but I will be up here with something new.
We'll make sure that we do that for our budget for next year then.
And I will say the staff that do it with me carry me, so hopefully they show up for me again.
All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. All right, and with that, we'll move into the middle school. Mr. Lefebvre.
Good evening. Thank you for welcoming me tonight to present the middle school budget for next school year. I'll start with the enrollment projections, which has been a topic of interest tonight. So our projection for next year is 1,063 students. Of note, we did hit our milestone this week of over 1,000 students. Interestingly enough, as of today, we're at 1,001, which was the projection for this year. So we'll at least be over it.
He's got it right.
So thought that'd be interesting to point out. But yeah, we did pass the.
Ways to go. Yeah.
We're not there yet, so we'll.
Yeah. Forget it. I take it
Maybe
back.
we need to
We'll be a
sign
be a little
up for
over.
more kids.
Yeah.
We'll be a little over. So, yeah, at 1,001 today and projected to be at 1,063 next year. So, overall, the middle school budget for next year that's being proposed is a slight decrease of 0.4%. It's representing a total of decrease of $29,875. I think that money is largely coming from a reduction in one-time purchases, like big-ticket items that we were able to purchase last year, furniture for classrooms, et cetera. So there's a slight decrease to the budget. The one position that we are looking for next year is a 0.4 FTE for orchestra. And this would support the growing number of students in grade 6 orchestra and I guess what I'll call the unique needs that they present. So in grade 6, as students are still learning in some cases to hold their instruments properly, but definitely tuning their instruments, that takes the bulk of the teacher's time. So this position is being proposed at 0.4 to support essentially the 2 periods of related arts in grade 6, specifically the orchestra program. So that 0.4 is budgeted at $29,614. As you heard from the other principals this evening, we're also asking for the increase to cover for substitute teachers at the middle school. Looking at previous years, came up with a number to propose of 56.8%. That is equivalent to $36,000 for the year. In terms of expenses, there are 4 line items that are increases over 1,000. 3 of those are purely due to rising cost and rising student enrollment. And then one new item, newer to the budget, is our math supplies budget. One of the unique things about the math experience in grade 8 at Hopkinton Middle School is we're essentially using a textbook that's been designed by our own teachers that functions as a workbook. So it's really a consumable. We have, for the last years that I've been here, we've run those packets and workbooks off on our copy machines. That's not a cost-effective or time-efficient manner of doing that. So I've priced this out to send these packets out to a printing company to get it turned over quicker. But that is a new addition to our expenses at the school. That's our.
So does that, you're talking about sending them out now?
Yes, to a printing company, so that's not taking, teacher time standing at a machine while those workbooks are being
So it
run.
also cut down on the amount of paper you use?
It should cut down on the amount of paper, yeah.
As well, I was thinking back to last year, and I don't remember if the middle school was one of them, but we discussed a lot of copiers last year and the need for replacement.
We would be one of those schools,
And
yes.
tear on the copiers is probably helped by that as well.
For sure.
I'm more curious, the drop from the 7th to 8th grade projections, that's due to kids going off to private schools? Is that typically why there's fewer 8th graders than there are 7th graders?
I looked at that number as well. I mean, there are a small number that moved to private school. This was just a smaller class. So we're seeing, our current 7th grade.
Historically not that big.
That's
a
correct.
drop. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Thanks.
So, while you might say a smaller class, I have very vivid memories of when we had very few classes that had over 300, and we're looking at your grade 7 inching up towards 400.
Yeah, it's the current, yes. Yep, next year's grade 7, right.
How is the middle school for space with that many students in a classroom? 25 seems like a big class for middle school.
25 per class makes the classroom feel very small. It's tight. I was joking with Mr. Bishop the other night that when I speak to the 9th graders, when they come back to visit, they immediately tell me how much better the hallways feel at the high school because they're so much bigger. So it's tight.
They're physically bigger, the hallways in the high school?
Yes, so in the students, no, the students feel they are physically bigger, and the students notice that difference right away. Yeah, we're pressed for space for sure.
Other questions? Other questions? Jean?
You answered my question already.
Great, thank you. Amy, do you have any?
Okay.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate that. We'll invite Mr. Bishop up for the high school.
All right. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about the high school and the FY26 budget. Last time I was on this stage, similar to Mr. Cotter, I was in a performance of Bye Bye Birdie, where I was a reporter and have not been asked back yet since then. So clearly, I know my lane here. But thank you very much. This is a process that is very collaborative. I know my colleagues talked about this. It starts in the end of September, beginning of October, our budget process. There's a lot of meetings that get taken place with subject matter leaders, central office, assistant principals. So I want to thank all of them for their help in crafting this budget. You know, I think we have put together what I believe is a fiscally responsible budget, but also one that supports our students and staff. So for our budget, we are looking at an increase from FY25 to 26 of 2.5% before personnel requests. So I thought I would go into our personnel requests, and then I'll talk a little bit about our expense summary requests. So for our personnel requests, I know we've talked a lot about projections, but even if you look at the actual numbers, our 8th grade is bigger than our senior class by a total of about 15 students right now. So we're going to see an increase there. We usually get move-ins around anywhere from 15 to 25 kids. So that number is going to increase. Our projections from Dr. Wagman for next year are upwards of 1,300. Our current enrollment is 1,276. So we are looking to add some positions at the high school for next year, 1.2 FTE, which roughly adds up to about $88,000 to meet the increased enrollment and make sure we have class sizes that are appropriate. We have multiple levels at the high school, as I know Savannah knows well. And we have different kind of class averages for those for reasons. We have AP classes that usually are around 27 students to 28 students per class. Honors classes are generally around 25 to 26. Our college prep around 20, and our foundations classes around 10 to 12 students. So we are looking for 1.2 FTE. The breakdown for that request is a 0.6 increase in staffing in our business, technology, and engineering department, specifically to increase the offerings for computer science. We currently have a 0.4 computer science teacher, which means that they teach 2 classes of computer science each semester, so 4 total. I think Mr. Lefebvre talked about it earlier. When students sign up for classes, we try to give them the classes that they want, but sometimes we just don't have enough options for them. Computer science is one of those subjects where we could have run many more sections, but we only had the staffing to run 2 per semester. So by adding some staffing into that department, making that individual a 1.0 computer science teacher, we'll be able to offer 4 to 5 sections of computer science per semester to meet the needs of students, which I think would be great. The other staffing we're looking for is a 0.6 French teacher to meet the level of interest of our students. Our French numbers are on the rise, which is great, but unfortunately we don't have the current personnel to meet all those demands. We've unfortunately not been able to run as many French sections as we wanted to. For those numbers, we had to collapse a French 5 class as well as a French 4 class this year. Many of those students had to take French online, which you can imagine is probably not the easiest discipline to learn. So by adding a 0.6, we've been hoping to be able to bring the class averages down. Right now they're around 27 in French, as well as making sure that we, like I said, reduce those class sizes and making sure kids don't have to take French online if they want to take it. So that's really the 1.2 increase at the high school. In addition, we do have a 0.4 wellness teacher that was approved by the school committee back in July that will be reflected in this FY26 operating budget. And similar to my colleagues, we will be increasing our substitute account from 55,000 to 80,000, which is a 43% increase. Going to our expense summaries, which includes equipment, supplies, textbooks, and other expenditure accounts. We're looking at an overall increase of 13,000, which is about a 3.9% increase from FY25 to 26. We have 34 non-payroll expense accounts at the high school. 16 of those will be level funded or show a decrease between FY26 and 25. Of the remaining 18 accounts, only 5 show an increase of $2,000. And so I have on the executive summary those 5 accounts with the reasons why the numbers are over 2,000. I'll quickly go through those. One is in our co-curricular account. We're up 5,400, and that really is to make sure that we provide transportation coach buses for our students to the junior prom. We have moved to this back in 2018. Students used to get their own transportation. Now we try to provide it for them. Prom is a very expensive endeavor. It's also a safe way for students to get to the venue. It's been a very big success for us. We've been working with Hopkinton Organizing with Prevention. They've been helping with grants to get those buses. Unfortunately, we were told that that might not be the case this upcoming year. So we wanted to make sure that we put the appropriate funding in this account so we can fund those prom buses. Yes? Susan?
Students buy prom tickets, correct? Does any of that bus transportation go into that ticket cost?
Not since we've had this process, no.
Is that a possibility?
It would increase that ticket price quite a bit, but yeah. Generally 60 to 75, yep. And it's, if you bring a date from outside the school, it costs money. Yeah, so it's about $60 to $75 depending on the year and the venue. Yep. Yep. So that's one account. Another account that's up is our contracted services. We actually have installed new vape detectors at the high school. And there's an annual fee that is associated with that, so that is the increase in that account. We are also moving our graduation ceremony to be outside permanently. We have done a little bit of both in the past. We've had it inside, we've had it outside, obviously during COVID, but now our classes, as we've talked about, over 300 are getting larger and larger. And while I think inside is a very nice ceremony, there's just too many kids, and if kids want to invite their families and upwards of a number of guests, we just can't fit everybody in the athletic center. So we are making the decision to go outside starting this year permanently. And so we need to put some additional funding in the graduation account for chair rentals, ramp rentals, other things that are associated with graduation. And then the last account that's up that I wanted to comment on is our new equipment. We have a lot of the equipment in our fitness center. I know Savannah can talk about it. Was bought when we opened the building back in 2001, 2002. So some of it needs to be replaced. And so we have updated one treadmill this year, and we're putting money in the budget for next year to purchase another new treadmill. So we're trying to do that kind of over the course of many years, as opposed to coming and saying we need 3 or 4 new treadmills. And so those are the accounts that are up in our expense summary that are over 2,000. And that's pretty much it for the high school. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Savannah, I don't know if you have any questions for Mr. Bishop?
Yeah, this would be a good time to.
Nope. I'm looking forward to the new treadmill. Oh, that's not going to be there.
Well, we're getting another one with the current budget, but yes. Yeah.
Jean, anything?
Less of a question than a comment, but as I remember, the Marathon Fund gives money for post-prom party, and I don't know if they would also contribute to the buses. It's not a lot of money, but I think it's money extremely well spent, just as a veteran of the limo drama and the financial and emotional toll that takes on all of the kids and their parents. I think this is such a much more equitable and safe way to get the kids to and from prom. So I wholeheartedly support it, but that might be also an offset.
Certainly, we can certainly look into that.
Great. Amy, did you have anything? Okay. Thank you. I think.
Great. Thank you so much.
You up here for the next agenda item as well, but
I can come back up. Yeah.
Go back and
yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, I can make the long walk. That's all right. Thank you.
But literally, because we still have athletics. Sorry.
Yeah, we have athletics, and I have 2 more.
Thank you. All right, so the next and final budget presentation for FY26 is Mr. Andrade for athletics. Nice to see you.
Good to see all of you. Good evening, and thank you all for having me up here to talk about athletics budget for the FY26. So overall, the budget is looking at a 1.9% increase, and I'd say most of that is from already pre-approved stipends from last year that you all approved. That's varsity and JV, boys volleyball, assistant varsity boys volleyball, JV wrestling, and a middle school track and field stipend. And so additionally, we have a little bit of an increase in our contracted services, and this is mainly due to our officials. The officials' fees are going up by 7%, and our ice hockey rink fees have increased substantially. But this is all offset by some changes to what we've used for pools, and so it's actually a decrease in that subject line. And a couple other decreases in some other areas of contracted services, so the addition is actually only $4,600. And then from the supplies and equipment line, I took a deep dive into what we've been purchasing over the last couple of years, and there's a number of things that we haven't purchased that we haven't had the need to purchase, which actually accounts for a decrease of $3,200 for that subject line. As for, professional development event staff, that's all remained the same. And so all we're looking for is an increase of $31,159, which is $29,000 of that is from the coach's salaries previously approved.
Thank you. Are there questions on the athletics budget? Comments? Okay. So is the pool cost, is that a different pool, or is the pool cost?
So it's a different pool that we've been using, and so previously we'd used a couple pools, and we've gotten away from that. We're only using one pool, so it's actually less because we've only been using one pool.
Okay, great. All right. Jean, do you have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I know this is old news. I just wanted to really compliment you on the success of the integrated sports teams. I think that's been an incredible addition to the program, so congratulations.
Thank you.
So it's hard just because the microphone is not that close to you, but it sounded like you said something about the unified sports.
I said great job on the unified sports. Sorry, it's old news.
We have a great unified sports group and coaching group that has been doing this a long time, and so when Matt introduced middle school unified bocce, and I helped out a little bit, but I know that went very well, and I'm excited about potentially expanding unified at the middle school and maybe even at the elementary schools eventually.
I'm excited to see the unified sports expand. I do remember when they first started, and I know that Hopkinton has been recognized for unified sports by Special Olympics as well, so appreciate that as well. Amy, did you have any questions? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of the budget presentations tonight. I have to also comment, I don't know what others feel about this, but I liked the way that we did this year, where we had more budget presentations on each night and we had fewer nights of budget presentations. So I think last year we had like 4 nights of budget presentations, so we ended up having an extra meeting in December because of it. So, all right, then we're going to invite Mr. Bishop back up.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Good night,
Savannah.
Savannah.
Night, Savannah.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, and this is for the Hopkinton High School Club Advisory Stipends for Mr. Bishop, who's... Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. Nice to see you all again.
Is this for the reprise of the Bye Bye Birdie as well?
Say again?
The reprise of the Bye Bye Birdie role as well?
Yeah. I didn't get those prizes. I still remember my line, though, actually. It's just one line. But. So, you want me to say it? He's coming, Conrad Birdie is coming. Yeah, right there, I nailed it. Yeah. That may have been better than it was when I actually did it.
Gave you one line?
Right, I know, after that. Yeah. I'll talk to the new drama teacher. We'll see what we can do. So I have, what order am I in? Is it the clubs first and then?
So club advisory stipend.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right, so I'm here to talk a little bit about our club process at the high school and hoping and asking for your approval to reallocate some funding as well as requesting some additional funding for our clubs. One thing we pride ourselves on at the high school is having as many opportunities for students to participate in different things after school. We currently have 72 different clubs, and we have students coming into the office almost daily asking to start new clubs. So we did put a formal process in place where they have to meet with the assistant principal and kind of go through a process of why they want to do the club, who's the advisor, how many kids are going to be part of it, because we were getting so many requests. And so year to year, what we do is we have a club fair in September. We see what clubs are running based on interest in advisors, and then there's some clubs that might not run, and we try to take the funding for those clubs that are not running and have them go to clubs that are running, right? So every time a student comes and says, I want to start a new club, and we approve it, it goes for 1 year without a stipend. If things are successful, then we hope to try to fund it the following year. So you can see on this memo here, we have 13 clubs that ran last year successfully that are looking to get a stipend. 6 clubs that are in the contract have run before but are not running this year because of either interest or advisor. So what we're hoping to do is take the funding for the 6 clubs not running and fund 6 of those 13 clubs, and then ask for an additional $38.92 for the 7 clubs that have started for a year and run successfully. So you can see the clubs that are no longer running on your memo on the left-hand side, and then you can see the new clubs on the right-hand side. So happy to answer any questions that you have about the club process or any of the specific clubs that are on this list.
Is there what's the minimum requirement? It's 2 people?
So we really try to have this, if a student comes forward, our form has, you must have an advisor and 5 students that are interested. Yep.
And typically, what's the stipend?
Usually it's about $556. Yep. Yeah, there are some clubs that might meet more often or participate in some type of competitions that might get paid a little bit more. These ones are all $556.
And that money would pay entry fees?
Yep. Yeah, all that stuff. Yep.
If it's not an entry fee, what are they using the money for?
Usually it's just for the coordinate, the advisor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to run the clubs.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
to run the clubs. Yeah, so all these clubs would meet probably once a week after school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. I love how this is generated by student interest and that there are so many different opportunities for the high school students to be involved in different ways in the school. So thank you for bringing that.
Yeah, I know it can be confusing the way we do it, but we like to have all the clubs out there, see
Yeah.
which ones have interest, almost like the classes that they pick, right? We have a bunch of classes. We don't run them all. We run what the students are interested in. So that's basically what we have here with the clubs.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Is there somebody that would like to make a motion?
I move that we reallocate $6,116 in the high school stipend account and approve an additional $1,112 to cover newly established clubs.
Second.
Right, so that's a motion by Jamie and a second by Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much for
Great,
that.
thank you.
You have
Awesome.
one more, which is the Hopkinton High School Model UN.
Awesome. Yes, so this is a overnight trip. And so I know that in your packet you have some of the details of our Model UN trip. It's coming up in February. This year it's in Boston, which is nice, at the Marriott Copley Place. This is one of those clubs, actually, if you look at the 13 that we've added this upcoming year, one is a second advisor for the Model UN. The number of students in Model UN has tripled in the last few years. Congratulations to our advisors, Savannah Histon and Shay Eller. They do a wonderful job. And so they are hoping to take students to the conference that's coming up. It's a 2.5-day conference. It's an overnight, so we need the approval of school committee. 21 students have expressed interest in attending this conference. They have been working really hard leading up to this, focusing on different types of things like research skills, diplomacy, civil discourse. If anyone's unfamiliar with a Model UN conference, basically students kind of get assigned a country and a role, and they have to debate students from across the country on different global issues. Last year we had students win awards such as Best Delegate, Best Position Paper, and Best Negotiator, which was really awesome and exciting. So this is a club that is really kind of taking off, and I think the advisors have done a really nice job. So we're looking for your approval and allowing them to go overnight to Boston for this really special experience.
Are there any questions on that? You need a microphone.
I was just saying, it was, I think it's a wonderful event, and the skills that the students are learning are amazing. And I make a motion to approve travel for the Model UN on February 7th through the 9th, 2025.
Motion by Kyla, second by Chris. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so that was also unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for.
Great. Thank you,
all
everybody.
your-
Thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.
All right, have a good night.
Have a good night.
Right, that brings us into the adaptive playground. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you. So you know that, thank you. Mrs. Rothermick has been working with a group derived of people who are citizen towns, parents, special education parents, the director of student services. Suffice it to say, there have been a lot of people on the playground committee, and they have looked at multiple parcels in town, and it was decided that they would choose the Marathon School to put the new adaptive playground. One of the reasons that they liked that spot is that they thought many of our most vulnerable students and students with special needs would be at the Marathon School 180 days of the school year, and then when school wasn't in session, families could come and enjoy the playground. We were hoping that there would be a possibility that that project could be funded by the CPC, but in the event that they don't approve that, and it does not seem likely that they would, and we've already been before them, and so what will happen now is they'll make a determination whether or not they would like to. But we're talking about it at this particular meeting because in terms of timing, it works out. So what we're wondering is if you as a board want to put that project forward without the CPC funding and have it go as one of the school's capital projects.
Susan, go ahead.
If we do that, does that mean we won't be considered for CPC funding?
Well, the CPC will be making a determination about whether or not they want to fund it. And so, I mean, if you do that, they may take that as a sign that that you have another plan. However, I don't think that it takes you away from the CPC option.
It would just be Plan B.
Do we? Sorry, go ahead.
When will they have that decision?
I believe they're meeting next week to look at all their projects.
And has there been an initial reason why they would not fund it? Have they said it's not appropriate, or it's not what CPC funds are used for, or the school committee should fund it, or the school budget?
So I do believe that that is a big piece of it. The feedback that we received when we were before the committee was that it really was a school ask and not an adaptive playground committee ask. So it was difficult to separate the request from just being a school request.
So if a separate committee that wasn't a part of the district requested it, they would say, oh, that's a great idea, we would approve CPC funds? I mean, this...
It's hard to say because it was the separate committee. It was the adaptive playground committee that was requesting.
Would it have made a difference if the site selection had been different, like Fruit Street?
Potentially as well.
They also do consider requests of the Park and Recs Department significantly, so I don't think the fact that it came from the school committee is a determining factor in that way.
I do believe that they have a lot of requests.
Yes, this year particularly, I believe.
And I think this is typical. I think they do receive a lot of requests. So I think we as a committee just need to be prepared, like I said, have a plan B a determination from this committee of what you want to do in the event of not getting full funding, or not getting full funding will not allow the project to move forward.
And watching the select board meeting on Tuesday night, it seems like they're highly interested in the center school reuse plan. That will take a significant amount of their funds.
So again, just a request to the committee of what would you like to do in the event, because we will be presenting to CIC, Capital Improvement Committee, all of the capital requests of the school committee that you've already approved, of which the playground was part of the presentation, but it was always with the intention of moving it to a CPC grant.
And just to clarify, the CIC meeting that we'll be attending is next Thursday night, which is.
That's before or after?
They're concurrent, actually.
Same time.
Well, yes and no. So the CPC is meeting on Thursday, the 12th, but I think their final review is the 16th, which is a Monday. But we will not have another meeting before to determine what we want to do to be able to get it in time for the CIC to consider it if it does not get funding. So we need to kind of signal one way or another if we're going to take ownership for the entire project, if CPC either funds none of it or only funds a small part of it, or whatever the decision
And
is.
if we need to fund it, it comes out of a capital improvement fund?
It's part of the capital.
And what's that process?
So that would mean that it would go to town meeting. So all capital projects, the town would decide whether they have enough free cash or whether it would be a borrowing, a debt exclusion. So they would determine exactly which side of the bucket that falls in, and then that would be how it is requested at town meeting. Even if we present this to CIC, Capital Improvements, that is still not a guarantee that it will be approved by the select board and move forward to town meeting.
So we submit it to CIC. Select board then says we will put it towards town meeting
or not.
or not, and at town meeting, it gets voted up or down.
Correct.
CIC makes recommendations.
And for reference, this is the third time that this has come before the school committee, and the school committee has recommended it to go forward. We did seek CPC funding last year as well, did not get the CPC funding. It was, I think, ultimately not included in the final budget that went to the select board, but we advanced it as far as we could.
Correct.
And I want to note that as far as building an adapted playground on a school property, there are 45 communities in Massachusetts that have used CPC funding to build adaptive playgrounds on school property. So it's not an inappropriate use of CPC funds. It's well established.
It is a legal use. So, that has been clarified by attorneys. It is a legal use of the funds, but it is up to the committee with all their competing interests what they would like to fund. So,
And members of the public are certainly welcome to share their thoughts with CPC if they feel that they like certain requests.
It's $1 million? Is that what it was?
it's a little over 1.2.
What's your recommendation?
I don't believe it's going to be fully funded by CPC.
Sorry, they can partially fund it?
They could partially fund it, but
Okay.
that wouldn't help unless you still went to town meeting.
Right, we'd then have to get the rest of it through that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, if this is something that is going to be a debt, I don't know that CIC will approve it. So it's really up to the committee where they want to move this, but at any juncture, it could get stopped, even if you move it forward. So that's just what's out there.
Sounds to me like we should push it forward, and it doesn't sound like, sorry, all the CPC.
I know.
Yeah.
CPC sounds like they won't approve it, or maybe they'll partially approve it, in which case we would need to push it to CIC. And, right, and then even if CPC approves it partially or not, or fully or partially, we would need to send it to CIC as well.
Correct.
So at least my feeling would be, let's push it to CIC.
This has been something that the CPAC group feels extremely strongly
Yeah.
that we need in our community.
Yeah.
And it's really been a
And it's not just for
missing
kids with
link.
disabilities
No.
that can use it. I mean, the whole
All.
town and all the kids can use it. It just allows kids with disabilities to have a playground really suited for them, but kids with non-disabilities will enjoy it in those families, so it's really a town playground.
The only drawback is that during school hours, only the school students can use it, correct?
When the kids are at school.
Right.
Right. And Marathon Playground, frequently when I bring my kids to EMC on the weekend, we and every other family at EMC Playground are going back and forth between
Yeah,
Marathon
same
and
here.
EMC.
Yeah.
And so it allows a space for families with typically developing kids and kids with other needs to play side by side in a public space, which is not often available.
Yeah.
I think that's really the drive behind the committee, is that typical kids and, you know, non-typical, or however you want to use that word, are able to play together in the same space.
Yeah.
And I think we can also remember that at Marathon School, we have a pre-K, so kids start there at age 3. And so for the 180 days kids are in school, 3-year-olds to 6-year-olds, so 3, 4, 5, and 6 all would have access to that playground.
Yeah.
I want to add, I do feel very strongly that us advancing this forward sends the message that we really believe in this project.
Yeah.
I agree.
Whether it gets CPC funding or not, my hope would be that we get some funding, but I feel like it's an important value to be inclusive of all kids to be able to play side by side and not have to, as Jamie said, go to different spaces.
Absolutely.
And there's also been an awful lot of time and effort put into it, and I'm really impressed at what we've developed there, and I think it should go forward however we can get it forward.
So are we making a motion?
I was just going to see if somebody wanted to do that.
Forward this to the CIC, the Capital Improvement Committee, as part of our capital plan for fiscal year '26.
I think, so does the motion need to be that, or does it need to be that we are approving the adaptive playground as part of our FY26 capital plan?
Okay.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Sure. So I'm making a motion that we include the adaptive playground in our capital plan for fiscal year '26.
Second.
Motion by Kyla and a second by Jamie. All those in favor? Aye. It is unanimous, and so passes. Much appreciated. Okay, that brings us into the superintendent search. Did everybody receive either, I apologize for the duplicating of the emails, but I wanted to make sure, because the last proposal came in yesterday, that people had seen it. So I sent it out by email, and then Georgette was kind enough to organize it nicely in the Google Drive so that people would be able to access all of the proposals together without having to search through your emails. So just for folks at home, that what we're discussing here is a consultant for the superintendent search. And as required, we did get 3 proposals, and they were all, I would say, very comprehensive, providing services that I think would be very helpful to us, as well as to the community, in helping us to make a selection for a new superintendent that embraces kind of the values of our schools, but also from what the community is looking for. The 3 proposals, there was MASC proposal, was $11,500. We do get a member discount since we are members of MASC. The NESDEC, which is actually the firm that we have used previously for superintendent searches, was $16,660. And HYA, which is not a Massachusetts-based organization, but they do superintendent searches, and they did come recommended as well, was 14,000. So the three proposals, there are definitely some slight differences in them, but I felt like they were all fairly good proposals. Would love to hear if people had specific thoughts or questions about any of them in particular, and then we can.
Where did HYA come recommended from?
So there are a bunch of different, it was used by another district in Massachusetts, but they have
They had significant number of districts they've worked with in
there's a significant
It's a
number of,
large.
right.
Oh, yeah, you said
So,
it was
yeah.
recommended, so I wasn't sure.
So,
if it
no,
was-
well, recommended by the people that have, like, in terms of, they have a lot of happy districts in there, that I received names of different, like, in talking with Kim Polnick, who's our former HR director, to get names of superintendent search
So Kim
consultants.
spoke to the other districts, and they said it went really well. We recommend.
She asked from other districts that had had successful searches for names of, like, who people had used.
The,
And
which group did we use last time?
NASDAQ.
NASDAQ.
So
And they helped steer the committee to hire Dr. Kavanaugh.
Correct. And in fact, in all of the searches that I could look at in the most recent ones where we used a consultant, we did use NASDAQ. I don't know why I wasn't able to find information anywhere that sort of looked at what proposals the committee had received and why NASDAQ was chosen, either from what they were offering or from a cost perspective.
So they all look similar, the price points are all similar.
For the previous searches, I don't know what the other ones were.
No, for
Oh,
the
yeah.
the proposals we have
yeah.
now, they're all
Correct.
similar.
Correct.
The one note that I wanted to make, that NASDAQ it seemed an add-on to do the community survey, community whatever point to that, and I feel that is a really important. If we go with them, we should add on that piece to it. The other ones, I think, included that in their base price.
The survey, I think, is included. It's the focus groups that are
The
not
focus
included.
groups, yes.
In theirs.
That, the idea of that is really enticing
Yeah.
to me.
Did we use, sorry, what's the name of it? NASDAQ?
NASDAQ, the New
Did-
England School.
We use them for Dr. Kavanaugh. Had we used them prior to that as
And
well?
we used them also for Dr. McLeod, and I believe we had.
How was Dr. McLeod?
Dr. McLeod was excellent.
All right.
And
So
we
get
used them
excellent ones.
for.
Use a NASDAQ.
Dr. Landman, I believe also was a NASDAQ, and I know MASC, I'd have to look back through in NASDAQ both. If there is a search that does not produce a candidate that lasts longer than like a year, they will do the search again, minus with the cost fees, but not the entire search fee.
Right.
I
Is there a
really like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason we don't use them again? They've seemed to have helped get us great superintendents and.
So one piece of information I want to remind you is we used to be a member of
Of
NASDAQ.
So we don't get the discount.
We are no longer, we used to use NASDAQ for their enrollment projections, and I think you heard Amy.
Oh, they
say
weren't very good.
They weren't
Right.
weren't
But
exactly accurate.
That's
Yeah.
not their skill set.
Yeah.
So we're no longer a member of NASDAQ.
What's the price break you get?
It's the
Substantial, or-
1660 for NASDAQ, which compares to the 11,500 with MASC, who gives us the discount for the, MASC would be a little bit more expensive.
I was really like NASDAQ where they
No, MASC.
scout for districts throughout the Northeast with similar characteristics to Hopkinton.
I'm sorry, can you repeat, which one are you discussing?
NASDAQ,
yeah.
yeah, because I think there is, I think this is a distinct community. And I think that is an important part of it.
Does anyone not want NASDAQ, or
So
do we have to choose one tonight? Is that what?
So I would, if we're able to choose one tonight, I
Yeah.
think that would be the preference. I actually really liked MASC.
Okay.
Part of it was the price piece in there, and they felt comparable, but I also really like NASDAQ, and I was pleased with the search process that happened, where we were able to hire Dr. Kavanaugh and Dr. McLeod before her, although I wasn't part of that search, but I was for Dr. Kavanaugh. So I'm happy with either of those. The HYA proposal felt less, it felt more generic to me. It didn't feel as, and because they're out of our immediate area, and I know they have a lot of different districts that they've worked with, they would not have been my top choice against either of the other two, but I would be
Is it
happy.
appropriate to get feedback from
Yes.
Carol, Susan, and Jeff about?
I do think it's about a 50-50
Yeah.
split. I see searches go out through MASC, and I see them go out through NASDAQ.
Yeah,
Both would do a nice job.
yeah. Sorry, what's the cost savings with MASC?
So it's almost $5,000, but less to go to, but when comparing NASDAQ to MASC.
And we get included the focus groups.
I gotta go back to I gotta pull the actual proposal up.
If I read correctly,
Yeah.
I think that was an add-on for NASDAQ,
Yeah.
where MASC.
The focus
Which
groups.
is why I preferred MASC.
Yeah, MASC includes the focus group.
How much does it show the add-on price for?
It's not an add-on for MASC.
No, for NASDAQ.
NASDAQ.
Is it an extra $2,000, $500? What's the
$425 per group.
$425?
And
Per
group.
Yep.
How many groups, do we know how many
So,
groups you normally do?
I think in the past, we've done like one for faculty and one for, we've done probably 3 or 4.
All right, so $1,600. So it's an extra $6,000 to use NASDAQ, approximately. I mean, if they're, again, if it's not broken, I'd say don't fix it. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
To go
and
with NASDAQ.
NASDAQ's a little more money, but,
Yep.
you know, you
We've had success with
pay
them.
peanuts, you get monkeys, so spending a little more money might be worth it. It's a pretty big position.
It is a big position, and we do want to make sure
It's-
that
That's a rounding error when you look at someone who's going to be leading the district, and if we got to spend an extra $5,000, and we've had this consulting firm do a great job 3 times in a row now. To me, that's who I would go with if everyone feels strongly about, you know, I won't break my pick over it, but
I wouldn't say I feel strongly about it one way or the
yeah.
other.
Did they bring a lot of quality candidates?
So in the last search, I believe there were 4 finalists. We had a lot, I wasn't part of the screening committee, so I can't speak to that angle of it at all, but the screening committee, they aimed to bring it down to 3 or 4 candidates, so that's what they did the last time, but the consulting firm will work with the screening committee as well as kind of through the entire process.
I mean, I
Getting
imagine we will
materials.
there'll be no shortage of really strong candidates for this job, whether we use
Yeah.
a consulting firm or not. I'm sure they will, you know,
Agreed.
we just need someone to guide us through the process, right?
And I think that
Yeah.
in part because it's a big job to do the search, I don't think we could do it as successfully without a consultant.
Yeah, it's money well spent.
Did you want to add?
No, I agree. It's, do we know what the MASC discount is? Like what it would be if we were going
It
on
is-
list? Just out of curiosity. I couldn't find that.
I feel like it's in the actual contract.
Oh, it's in the contract part, okay.
If you go into, it may be in the finer details.
While you're doing that, on the MASC website, they do list the districts that they have worked with recently. So I can tell you what some of those are. Recently, Nahant, Seekonk, Northampton, Weston, Waltham, Melrose, Norwood, Marshfield, Groton Dunstable, Farmington River Regional School District, Cohasset, Leominster, Malden, Fall River, Swansea, Marblehead, West Springfield, Lenox, Georgetown, King Philip, Webster, Bedford, Milton, Danvers, Ware, Provincetown, Chicopee, Lynn, Leakin, Sudbury, Palmer, Westwood, Dartmouth, and Somerville. They currently have searches going where they've closed for Quabbin, Springfield, Brockton, East Hampton, and Winchendon. And then they have open ones right now in Mashpee, Nauset, and Mansfield.
In your experience, would a superintendent from out of state be comfortable here? Or would it be a learning curve jump?
No, I think that if you're working in New England, for example, you could certainly go from, say, Rhode Island to Massachusetts, or Massachusetts to Connecticut, and I think that that does happen.
I just wondered about school law from state to state differs.
A little bit, yeah.
I did hear from some colleagues, I was discussing with colleagues at work today about another community that had a superintendent search, and they had quite difficulty in their search, but they're a very different district than ours is. I think we will do better at attracting high-quality candidates than.
Do you know who they used?
They were one of the ones just mentioned by Dr. Kavanaugh. And those were the ones from MASC.
MASC, yes.
Yeah. It was an inner city district.
Currently.
I'm just looking to see if I can find the
exact. We're currently looking at NESDEC, and they
difference
have
in what it
two
we would have
searches
paid if we
going
were
right
not a
now.
member district.
Bolton, Connecticut,
I don't
and
think it's in these.
SAU 35 must be New Hampshire, is it? Yes, it always is, yeah.
It's, I don't think it's in there.
I know there is a discount, though, and
Oh, for
it could be,
NASDAQ?
it could be a verbal thing that I got
thought it
from
was
Kim as well,
600
though.
something, they said, because they said if we paid it, we would get other stuff.
This
Oh,
is
I was wondering what the discount is for MASC.
Oh,
Like, is it like,
MASC.
if we weren't members, would it just be the same as NESDEC's fee, or?
I don't think it's that large of a discount. I don't think it would bring it up that far, that significantly.
Do we need a motion to,
So we will need a motion if we would like to do this tonight. I think the advantage of doing it tonight is we can engage with the firm immediately and have them help us along the way with everything. We can get jump on it sooner.
Yeah,
I also
6
don't,
months.
if there are pieces of information that you feel are missing to be able to make the decision, I would honor that as well.
I move that we go with NASDAQ for the superintendent search.
second?
So motion by Susan, a second by Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
So, and I need a separate motion to authorize, for the committee to authorize me to sign the contract with them, or is that?
As school committee chair,
As school committee.
you have that authority.
Okay, all right. All right, so the other piece, and we don't have to vote on this exactly tonight. I had sent out an email. I was able to pull out the composition of 3 different screening committees. And the screening committee, just for folks at home, but also to remind people here, is the first step of what we look at when we're looking at the applications that we have. In the screening committee, it will require that the people on the screening committee will have to give up probably a chunk of 2 separate days in order to be able to do it. I will definitely want to have NESDEC help us with that process, but I want to talk about composition in terms of what the biggest piece, I think, right now is we've had people from the community reaching out. And the two things I think we want to think about are, one is how many community members do we want to have on the committee? And two, how do we want to select them? And I can say from the last search, and that's the only search that I can say for sure, what we did is we had 2 school committee members review the applications and make a recommendation to the entire committee in terms of, after reviewing the applications and talking with the applicants. It's a lengthy process, both I think for the applicants and the committee to get involved in having to interview each and every one, but it does offer the school, I think the school committee should be the group of people deciding who the specific people are on the committee, would be my thought on that. Other thoughts for, I mean, did people see, I sent it right before the meeting started, the document that indicates the last 2, and then one I couldn't find what the year was of the thing. I think the 13 to 15 member composition is probably about as big as we want to get it. I think bigger than that, reviewing.
Seems big.
Seems big. I don't know from a practical standpoint how that many people get into a room or beyond that number of people.
That whole committee would sit in on the interviews.
So they would do through the initial interviews, and it's a confidential executive session type of situation, so that the people who first apply, they'll go through the resumes, and they'll get those first steps, and they'll then recommend finalists. At that point, when they have the finalists out of that group will disband, and it'll be passed on to us. I mean, we're part of it anyway, and the other piece is if we want, 2017, there were 2 school committee members on the screening committee. The one 2011, before that, it was 1 school committee member. So I don't know how people feel about how many people are available to do something like that day and would have the interest in that.
If it's during the day, I have availability.
You do in the day. Okay, interest?
Sure.
Also interesting.
Okay, so everybody's interested. I do think actually, I would prefer to take a different role than being on the initial screening committee, so I would say it's the 4.
I mean,
4 of you
should
are
we,
interested, but
are there, because I haven't seen, at least yet, a detailed what the process is, like, because also if we're, there's this committee, okay,
Yep.
Susan and
So-
Kyla did that, so now you're not going to do this next. Like, I think we need to understand the entire 1,000-foot view before we.
So, and that's the piece that as a committee we have to decide upon. Do we want to interview, have 1 or 2, probably 2 of us, select who the community members are going to be on the committee by looking at the applications? So that would be one opportunity for school committee members to participate in that. The next, and it again, it kind of comes down to the magic number of 2 because that's a quorum of the, more than that is a quorum of the committee. The next piece is the screening committee. And then beyond that, it's all of us. And it's looking at bringing people, there is one other part that would not be all of us, and that's the site team visits that would go out to the sites where the finalists are from. So that would be like an assistant superintendent or a superintendent or somebody else from another district. We would have a group of people that would include 1 or 2 school committee members who go to that site and listen to different staff that would come and talk about them, the opportunity to ask their staff questions to see some of the work that they've done and be in their district. So there would be that piece. There is another piece at the end where the finalists come here, and then we're able to, they get a tour of the district. Obviously, if it's somebody who's in district, they know what the district looks like, but it's an opportunity. Then there would be the school committee will interview the finalists individually, and they will have forums for the committee, for the community to be able to discuss. So those are the high level, but also some of those steps, we're going to work with the consultant to figure out timing and exactly how we want that to be, to have them guide us.
So if it seems like it would make sense to talk to the consultant before we make decisions on that.
So I think for the larger piece, yes, but I think it's important to start thinking about how many community members we want, because if that's a process we're going to go through, we want to be able to get that up and running with the consultants fairly quickly. And also because the community is reaching out and saying, I want to do this, I want to be part of the screening committee, and what's the process for it?
We can do those concurrently, right? As we engage the consulting company and also put, is it a posting that goes out and says,
Yes, and they will work on the posting, and
oh, the consulting
the
firm?
consulting
Okay.
will work on the posting. Are you talking about the posting for the community or for the superintendent?
The community.
That piece we can do ourselves.
Right, so we can do that and engage NASDAQ concurrently, right? We don't have to wait till,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct, and that's a piece.
And then
that-
they will then help steer us through what those next steps are, right?
How many were on the screening committee for the Director of Student Services?
That's a good question. I don't actually recall.
I'm
that.
trying to remember.
There wasn't a screening committee of that nature because that wasn't, because this is just
There were,
our higher, they didn't go through the screening process like that, correct?
oh, right.
They didn't look, it was the Director of Student Services, we went through the resumes and looked at the ones that then a committee interviewed those people. But it wasn't like we took 20 of them and people all sat down. Rather, a small group of us took 20, whittled it down, say, for example, to like 7, and then we got back to interviews.
Do people want to wait for the consultant, or do we want to start looking for the community members now, would be the.
I mean, I see value to having someone who does this every day and we're paying a lot of money to give us a best practice rundown.
How would a community member, do they send to you an email that says, I'd like to be considered?
So we actually had an application form the last time that we sent out in the committee. The last time, I know we did that, we put the committee together before we engaged with the consultant. But it can be done either way, there's no.
All right, then, I mean, I can't imagine it'll take long to engage NASDAQ, right? And then quickly, they'll tell us what best practices are, and we can then, I mean, we don't have to meet again to say, okay, let's activate them and put the application.
So we do have to vote on what the composition of the screening committee is.
Oh, we do, okay.
So, but we.
But say NASDAQ says, hey, put 10 people on it, or whatever.
Right.
Could we then just do a Zoom, if it was, if NASDAQ, you know, it was 2 weeks before our next meeting, can we just schedule a Zoom call? Okay. All right, so as soon as they give us a recommendation on what those best practices are for the screening committee, we can quickly just get on a Zoom, or if our next meeting is in a day or two, then we won't lose time.
We have a meeting in 2 weeks, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, it might be, I don't know, maybe they could have this info by next week, but I assume it can't take more than 2 weeks.
To put the screening committee together to get.
Well, for
NASDAQ.
NASDAQ, NASDAQ, for us to activate NASDAQ and then say, we want to get moving on the screening committee, can you give us some advice on what to do? That, I imagine, is a very quick phone call.
I would say.
Yeah, okay.
It won't take.
So let's
long.
do that. Let's activate them, get their feedback on what those best practices are, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll need a vote on what their recommendation is, or talk about it, and come up with a number that we want on the screening committee, and then it can quickly get posted to, I don't know, wherever it gets posted, the application. All right, great.
It would go out, I would think, through listserv, and we'd want to advertise it kind of in,
Yeah.
various social media, and probably hope that The Independent and other
Yeah.
pop news and whatnot pick that up. So, all right. So I'll get us roll back to our agenda. All right, so I will reach out to NASDAQ in the morning and see, get a contract signed and get them moving as quickly as we can.
Yeah, get them to throw in the focus group.
Yes, I I like the focus groups too.
Yeah,
and
they should throw that in. Say, hey, we're going to go with this other group unless you throw that in.
Just do it.
Hopefully they're not
We
watching
have a
tonight.
discount of using them for 2 times
Yeah,
previously. No.
yeah, we gotta have a,
Yeah.
there's gotta be something.
Frequent flyer.
Gotta be something in there.
All right, so then we'll move into the school year calendar survey. All right, Dr. Kavanaugh.
So you all received that school year calendar. And what I did was I merely took the opening to that calendar and changed it. I modified it very slightly so that it's for the current day. Because in the past, we've talked about 2019, 21, 22, and now we're in a position where we want to know what the community thinks about the calendar and what kinds of time that people would like off or not like off. And I think I've said it to this group before, that one of the things that's exciting about this calendar is it gives us information about people's religious needs or, cultural observances or holidays. And that's very hard information to glean. DESE will help you to understand lots about your demography, but it does not have this kind of information, so it is helpful. So you all had an opportunity to take the survey, kind of get a feel for it, and I don't know if there are things in there that you wish were there that you would like to eliminate.
I thought we were going to add in the question about the vacation weeks.
That's like, it's a little,
was in
it's like
there,
the fifth
Was it
option
there?
under question 7.
Yeah, it was in
Yes,
there.
Okay.
it's there. It does say collapsing February,
Yeah.
April
It was a
vacations
few weeks
into
ago. I
one
took it
week-long
now.
vacation
Yeah.
in March
Okay.
each year. Afterward, I did recall that we had that conversation in one of the iterations of the calendar subcommittee, and what we realized was if you are thinking about February vacation, there are really only 4 days out of school. April, there are only 4 days out of school. So if you collapse them and went with a week in March, it would be 5 days out of school, so the savings is 3 days on the entire year-long calendar.
We're just deciding tonight if what the survey looks like is the one we want to send out to the
Yes.
community, right?
Yes,
All right.
I think last time we talked about not wanting to send it before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because it certainly gets lost in the shuffle of the
Yeah.
holiday.
Survey looked good to me.
The only thing that there's one that says like, I want to reduce all the holidays except for the federal holidays, and then there's another one that says I would like to reduce some of them.
Yes, because we did have people who wanted to maintain something like Good Friday, or like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but they were not interested in having things that were beyond those. But that was our traditional calendar when I first got here, was Good
Yep.
Friday, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and none of the other holidays that we've added.
Okay. I just don't know if that's clear when you read the responses, because when you read those together, it does look like a large majority of people. When in fact, like, you know what I mean? Maybe not.
So
being
you're
clear.
talking about when we shared the responses from the previous survey with you. If you can tell me which question it is.
To look at it.
Oh, I see, it's question 7. Maintaining the non-mandated holidays included in the current calendar. So now that means Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Good Friday, Eid al-Fitr, Lunar New Year, and Diwali.
Can we make that clear in the question?
Like, do you want them listed out?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do that.
It's late.
That way people know what they're answering.
Yes.
Because they might not realize, since like Good Friday has been included for so long, that that is actually a non-mandated holiday.
Yes. That's what I'm getting at. Thank you.
Same with Christmas Eve, that should be clear, because I think that came up in the last iteration, that is a.
Not mandatory.
Otherwise, do we need to make a motion to go forward with the survey, or?
No,
that we need a specific, I mean, it never hurts to have a specific one, but because I think we voted last time to have
It go through?
it go through.
Yeah, we didn't, because you had a calendar subcommittee last time, the calendar subcommittee approved this, so. I mean, I would say you could vote if you wanted to, or you could just
I think we're okay with
authorize me
going
to send
forward.
that, and I'm happy
Send it
to
away.
send
Go
it.
ahead.
Yep, okay. Okay. Then that moves us down to items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
I move to approve the items by consensus.
Motion by Jamie,
Second.
second by Chris. All
Aye.
those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then I would seek a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by
Second.
Chris, second by Kyla. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And our next regular meeting, we have a joint meeting next week. No, it's the week after, actually, with, right?
With the
It's
select board,
with the
yes,
select
the
board.
Tuesday, the
On the
17th,
17th. And then,
the 19th.
this is listed as the 19th, but I believe it's
The
actually
19th
on
is the regular
17th.
meeting.
Yeah, but it's listed on the
I
agenda.
know, I see that.
So we have those to look forward to.
Sorry, the
The
17th.
The 17th is not the joint.
It's not going to be it anymore?
Is
So
the
we-
19th. We
we've
did
just gotten
clarify
back.
that.
Oh,
We have just gotten the 17th back, and we're going to have the joint meeting on the 19th, as well as our regular meeting. And that, for folks at home, will also be the superintendent's budget recommendation will be right there.
I'll be remote. So I'll meet.
So I only have to worry about walking out the 19th.
Yes.
yes,
Very
that is what they're
much.
saying.
All right.
You got a free night.
Thank you.
Use it wisely.
And thank you to April for everything here at the middle school.
Yes, did a great
Good night.
job.
Dr. Kavanaugh,